Hello, this is Dylan again with the Embroidery Warehouse. Today I'm going to show you the removal for the transformer on this TFMX Tajima embroidery machine. So to start off with, I went ahead and preemptively did this. I explained in a separate video. You'll need to get a Phillips long enough to reach through this guy to get to that other screw there. And you'll be able to take both of these off to be able to remove these plugs. These plugs are going to be pinch and pull. And then what you'll do next is get a number 4 Allen and go through and remove each of these 4 bolts. All right, now that we have this transformer set up on a table where we can remove the 12 individual Phillips screws here, we're going to start removing those now. So there's 3 on the lower right, and then 2 in the upper right, 2 in the center here, and vice versa for the other side. Now that we got the screws removed, we can remove the cover to the housing. Now, if you're ever interested, there is some schematics of the electrical layout for this transformer. For the schematics of this electronic transformer, this will be very useful if you're setting your machine up, whether it's 210 or 110, and it'll kind of let your electrician know on how to set it up in case there might have been a need for a change to go from 110 to 210. So what we're going to be doing here, just resting this on the table here, is getting the fuse housings here and here replaced for when they have an issue right in there. You see that broken little piece of metal there? Just a little bit, you can just barely see it. That's actually the cause for when the scenario of the housing, this is what it should look like, but this is what it ends up looking like, because that housing clips over onto this guy. Now this is that 5 amp fuse housing. This is the 15 amp, it's a little more heavy duty. However, when it gets stuck from this pinch on one of these, if you slightly over tighten it, it causes it to ride up onto this and just basically locks itself in there. And it ends up breaking right there off into here. So we'll be removing this with a different shot and hopefully getting this resolution for you quickly. So here you can see we have the 2 housings for the fuses. You'll want to make sure you take a picture on which one's which according to the fuses here. So 15 amp, 5 amp. So here 5 amp, 15 amp. Now another thing to pay attention to would be to take a photo of the orientation of the wires. Each one is labeled, but in case yours isn't, you may want to create your own label. And of course, as always, take pictures for documentation of how it is originally. So what I'll do here is start off with removing R3 here. And yeah, so this piece is actually the piece that broke right here. So that's where that connection faltered at. That thin piece of metal ends up breaking off inside. And it could be an attempt to repair, but for a machine of this size, using a transformer this big, I wouldn't want to risk anything. So we'll have to use some pliers here and remove that. So here's the piece up close. And this is what's happening, is as you're trying to undo the connection when it's locked in, I mean, you can tell even this one, it was used with pliers to remove. And actually, it's a fairly common situation to happen from my research. So this piece broke off here. When you're trying to undo it, the metal is not holding into place because it's locked in right here. So it's going to end up twisting, and by the time you get it off, it's sheared clean off. So this is the piece we're going to be replacing on this guy. And I'm just going to remove the other one just for educational purposes. So we have R3 removed. Then we have R2 over here on the other fuse housing. That one came off, that one is intact and not the one causing us headaches. Now the other is going to be R2. And lastly, we have R3 over here. There you go, you can see that maybe, R3. So I'll remove that here. And again, your orientation may not be the same. Maybe somebody did the same thing I am and just swap sides. This one has two different connections. This is what I would call like a push-in connection. So I'm gonna have to squeeze these guys in and push the fuse out in two different sides. Fuse housing. There we go. You can see where this piece inserts at right here. Now, if your uncle wants to take a whack at it, just let him know this is going to be powering your multi-thousand embroidery machine, and it's probably just cheaper to replace this piece. So this is that fuse housing with that piece broken off here. So we're going to be replacing this. Now, usually when I look at parts, I'll look at not only what the Tajima parts manual names this piece, but also the individual piece as well. So F240, 250 volts, 10 amps, Sato parts. That's going to be key. So my guesstimation would be F240 and Sato parts is going to be what I'm going to look up and verify with the data sheet if it is provided. If not, I'll just make sure it's for 250 volts and 10 amps. Now the other fuse housing here, as you can see, it's been set with Loctite or a variant of that. And we're going to ahead and just leave this alone because we're not worried about this one. This one is connecting correctly and we haven't had any issues with replacing fuses. So we're going to replace the one that broke and I'll show you that. All right, now that we have our piece connected here, I'm going to insert it in. And then we're going to refer to our photo for the different connections for each lead here, and then put everything back together. Now, with everything connected, just as a reminder, the way this machine is, R3 is going to be that top piece that broke originally, R2 for the lower one, then we have R2 again for the lower back on the other side, and then R3 again for the front here. So R2 for the rears, R3 for the ones closer to the end here. So here and here are R3, R2, and R2. All right, now that everything is plugged back in, I'm gonna reinstall the shell. Remember, we have 12 screws. And I'll start by lining up the top. Now that we're wrapping everything up, we'll just want to make sure we put the appropriate fuses into the correct areas, 5 amp, 15 amp. And remember, this one's that push and twist. Now we got both of these securely in, and now it's time to reinstall.